Okay, welcome everyone. I'm Kristen Rodier. I'm an associate professor of philosophy in the Center for Humanities. My pronouns are she, her. Welcome to Whom You Cheat. I'll just start off with a brief land acknowledgement. I'm currently in what is colonially known as St. Albert, Alberta, which is the Treaty 6 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis in Alberta. Athabasca campus is on the traditional homeland of the Dene, Woodland Cree, Nakota Sioux, Blackfoot, Tsuut'ina, and Métis Region 4. But our virtual work is such that there are people from all kinds of parts of this land. And so if you want to add a land acknowledgement in the chat, if that fits for you, please feel free to do that. It can be a nice way of sort of landing at the beginning of something like this. One thing I'll say is that we will do 3 scenarios, and after the scenario, we'll put up this interactive website called Mentimeter, where you will input responses and then we'll respond to those responses. And I just want you to know that the website that we use is confidential and anonymous, and it doesn't take your personal information. You just can put in your thoughts and your name won't be used. So I'll hand that over to one of our other panelists, Kaleigh.
Thanks very much, Kristen. Yes, I'm Elaine Fabro. I'm the university librarian, and I'm speaking to you from the town of Athabasca, which is located in Treaty 6, the territory of the Cree and the Métis peoples. And in my role, I oversee the operations of the library, the archives, and the copyright office, and my pronouns are she, her. So, Jean.
Thanks, Elaine. I'm Sarah Jean Watt, and I'm speaking to you from Amiskwitchi, Waskahikan, Beaver Hills House, or Edmonton on Treaty 6 territory. It's the traditional territory of the Plains Cree, Woodland Cree, Beaver Cree, Ojibwe, and the Métis people. I'm the Right Site coordinator here at Athabasca. And if you haven't heard of us before, the Right Site is AU's online writing center, and you'll probably learn a bit more about the support you can get there as we discuss our scenarios today. I'll also just note that our meeting will be recorded today and posted on the library's YouTube channel, so you can review the recording later if you like. You can also turn on live captions if you wish now. Click the More button, it has 3 dots on it, and then scroll down and click Turn on Live Captions. And if you'd like to mute the chat notifications, then also under More, choose Settings, then Mute Notifications and/or Don't Show Chat Bubbles. And finally, please raise your hand if you'd like to speak, and we'll call on you and give you access to your microphone. You'll just have to unmute yourself. So you can find the Raise Your Hand button under Reactions, which is right beside More. And we also encourage you to use the chat. Just a gentle reminder, however, that this is an academic forum, so please be aware of keeping your comments professional and on topic. If there's anything that you'd like to talk to us about individually, we'll be posting contact information and resources throughout, and we're here to help. So I'll get that posted shortly. And finally, we have a short survey about this webinar if you'd like to tell us what we're doing well and what we can improve. So I'll post that link shortly as well in case you have to leave early. And I'll also post it again near the end of the session. And I'm going to post all those introductory comments in the chat in case you'd like to review them. And then we will get started.
Great. Thank you so much, Sarah Jean. So our first scenario, I think I went over the format a little bit. We'll go over a scenario and then we will have a discussion. But let's just jump into that. So our first scenario is called Temptation's Toll. And in this scenario, Kaleigh, student, is having difficulty getting started on a case study assignment in business class. She Googles the course number, to see if there are any study groups where she can chat with other students. But what comes up instead are pages on coursehero and other essay sharing sites that show previous student assignments. They're all blurred, so she can't see what's there. It asks her to upload an assignment and to be able to see the blurred section. A little bit of quid pro quo. She is desperate at this time, so she grabs a years-old assignment and uploads it, planning to just peek at the case study and then delete her own upload. But when she looks at the case study, she realizes right away she missed part of the assignment instructions and doesn't even need to look at what she just unveiled to herself. So she then goes to delete what she uploaded on coursehero, but it won't let her. So her heart just sinks as she realizes that she uploaded an assignment with her name and the instructor's feedback on it. What should Kaleigh do? So here's the participation moment where we want to hear from you. So what you do is you go to menti.com and you can enter this numeric code, or you can click on the link that I just put in the chat. And so what I have here is 4 options of ways that you could advise Kaleigh. Everyone can see my screen, right? Yeah. And so there's...
Sorry, Kristen, I think we have 1 or 2 people calling in, so I'm just going to read out the code. If you go to menti.com, you can type in the code 9323 1414. So 9323 1414. Thanks.
Great. And then I'll read these options so that people can think along with us. And someone is asking what coursehero is. So coursehero, I hate to educate on it, but it is a website where students share assignments, which is generally speaking against most institutions' academic integrity policies. So it's kind of a cheating website. So what we have here are 4 options kind of ranking how you would advise Kaleigh in this situation. So Kaleigh's calling you and saying, this is where I'm at. People are ranking them, but I'll just read them out. Direct her to counseling and mental health supports, share time management tips and websites so she doesn't get desperate again, help her find legitimate study groups, and suggest she contact her tutor explaining her mistake and that she is correcting it. So yeah, I really like how everyone has ranked these. It seems like one is, most people really think the first one is the first one. It's not just in close competition with the second one. Yeah, so let me see. So in the first instance, thanks everyone for your participation on that survey about what Kaleigh should do. And maybe you have other ideas of what she should do. You can throw those in the chat. We'd love to bounce ideas. That's just what I kind of came up with. But first of all, I feel like when it comes to, looking for help on assignments, we really can struggle in the online environment because we don't have that period of time after class going, have you started the assignment? What did you do to start the assignment? We don't have that kind of informal space to chit chat with peers. And so I really get why Kaleigh, went looking for study groups, because that's what she looked for, off the hop. So I really just want to validate that instinct to look for peers. We really do need to reach out to peers and to support each other and create that community. Just getting through online learning is really difficult. But when it comes to an assignment which has specific assignment instructions, I think we want to be really careful about what is collaboration. So can you collaborate on an assignment versus can we form study groups, support groups, sharing tips and tricks about online learning and getting through our courses. So really check with your tutor, find out how much collaboration is allowed, and find their contact info. And so the other thing I want to say is and thank you in the chat for asking about what kind of website this is Kaleigh is panicking partly because, you know, she needs help with this assignment, but also now this website's not giving her assignment back, and her private information was uploaded and she's not allowed to take it off. So I just want to caution everyone against these companies, because what they're doing is providing an unethical service, which tells us that they're not going to feel obligated to treat you in an ethical way. So we've heard about cases where, you know, private information is disclosed. Maybe even students have to pay money to get some of their information back. We're really not dealing with a company that's got your best interests in mind, let's say. And then also directly using these kinds of websites is against our policy. I'll put the policy in the chat just so you can refer to it, but we really want to stay away from these sites. And I'll just pass over to Sarah Jean. Yeah, people are sharing tips in the chat. That's great.
Yeah, I also wanted to comment on how the site presented itself with that blurring. I could see the blurring kind of adding to Kaleigh's desperation. It makes what's underneath seem more treasured and important. But don't be fooled by that, because is this assignment that it gives you even that likely to be very good? You know, you really don't know anything about the student who authored this assignment and all of that. So you don't really know what you're getting. And that secrecy also suggests to me the site's exploitative nature, that, you know, they're really trying to get students to upload more and more assignments. My tips for Kaleigh kind of go backwards in time. And what I would suggest to her is time management and planning to avoid that desperation. So she can actually plan how long to spend on each stage of the writing process, have planned out what to do each day. And that includes understanding the assignment instructions. That's the very first step in the writing process. If you're not sure how to do this, you can always use an assignment calculator to help you split up the time that you have over the writing process. And I'll put a link to a list of some assignment calculators in the chat there. I would even suggest reading the assignment instructions at the beginning of the course for all of the assignments. And that way your brain can be processing them while you're working through the course materials. And you know, you'll start to make those connections. Oh, this would help me on this assignment. This would help me on this assignment. So even if you don't have a full understanding of the assignment yet, because you haven't gone through all of the course materials and you're not quite there yet, it'll still give you that preview. I think that's really important. And in Kaleigh's case, she missed something in the assignment instructions. So reading it at the beginning of the course and then reading it again when she has planned to begin that assignment will help her to be better prepared to understand that. Also, from the beginning of the course, it's a great idea to introduce yourself to your instructor so that you have that line of communication open. And when you get to this point of questions and confusion, you can reach out to them and you have that connection going. You know, you can even say, like, when you introduce yourself, you know, why you're taking the course, what program you're in, what you're studying, those types of things, just to kind of get that rapport going, and then they know your name and they know, oh, this, you know, they're going to click on that email and get back to you because they know you a little bit, right? And your instructor also knows their own expectations, and that's why I would suggest that Kaleigh goes to her instructor next time instead of to the internet. Maybe these papers she's found online are from another instructor with different expectations and different preferences. So again, it's not really the best resource for that. And online learning can feel like you're very much alone. So it could be helpful for Kaleigh to know she's not alone. She can discuss it with her instructor, like I said, to make sure she understands. She could work with a writing coach at the rate site to help her plan and then confirm that plan with her instructor. And some students mentioned some different online resources to get in touch with peers like Discord. Some students also use Facebook. AU, I believe, will soon be implementing a tool called Nearpeer to give you that. And it should be integrated through your Brightspace or your Moodle. So you can chat with other people in your course or your program. I also just wanted to mention, because of that suggestion of looking for those peer groups, if you do use them, just make sure that you are using them also in an ethical way, not using them to kind of like share assignments, like recycle people's assignments. Some people might encourage you to do that, or it might kind of seem like a kind of quick fix. Again, if you're feeling that desperation, make sure that you're using them to kind of guide and support each other, as opposed to potentially getting yourself in hot water. Again, that policy is there that Kristen mentioned, and you can check that out. We also have another scenario where we discussed the Facebook group and something kind of questionable that came up in it. So I'll see if I can find that and post that in the chat. And my final point I just wanted to mention is that if you can't reach your instructor, you can also reach out to the course coordinator. And I'll give you a link in the chat that shows you how to find the coordinator for your course. And I'll hand it over to Elaine.
Thanks very much, Sarah Jean and Kristen. Yeah, I agree very much with what my colleagues have said. For me, the real issue is that Kaleigh doesn't really understand what the assignment is asking. And while Googling the name of the course name, or Googling the course name and number created a problem, there are other things that she could have done instead that would have avoided that problem and actually helped her to complete the assignment in an ethical way. For example, the library has materials in the catalog on the case study method, which would have been good sources for Kaleigh to review to help her understand exactly how to get started. The other thing that she could have done was actually searched on Google for a case study method, and that would have pointed her to things like library guides on how to approach case studies. Using Google is not necessarily a bad thing. You just have to be really, really careful about what it is that you're actually looking at. And so that's something to really be thinking carefully about. The other thing is that the Library Information Desk has staff who can help students to work through their assignments so that we can point the student in the direction of resources that would help, and to answer questions about things like creating search strategies and identifying the sources that might be relevant, and really just helping to take away some of the fear that comes along with assignments like this that you don't feel really comfortable with. Okay, just looking at the chat. Thanks, Alexander. That's great feedback. Okay, so we'll go on to the next scenario. which is called "'Twas the Night Before Citations." And the scenario is this. Braden is writing a paper for his political science class. His professor is very clear that students can use ChatGPT for brainstorming and outlining their papers, but that they must do their own writing. They must share which AI tools they have used and their prompts in an AI use transparency statement. It's late at night, the night before he plans to hand the paper in, and Braden realizes that he's over the word count. He decides to put a couple of paragraphs into Chat GPT and ask it to condense and clarify his writing to sound academic. He then hands in his paper to his instructor, but leaves out this final prompt from his transparency statement. He later gets an email from his professor saying that his citations point to sources that don't exist. What should Braden do? So I'll start off. And for me, there's a number of, I guess we need to do the Menti first.
Yeah, we're going to get some participation here. So I'll read out the menti.com, join using code 93231414. This is a great scenario. Oh, thanks, Kevin. Okay, what should Braden do? We've got 4 options here. One is deny that he used a prompt he didn't disclose. Another one is blaming ChatGPT. Some of these are things people do, maybe not things we should do, but offer to redo the assignment from before he used the unauthorized prompt. That is already a popular option. Drop the course and never speak of it again. I thought that was a good one. I don't know. Start over, leave. No.
It is. It could actually happen. You know, that fear strikes your heart and you just withdraw. So it's good to take a step back and look at other options.
Absolutely. This is a great scenario, and yeah, Andrew Kelly is in the chat. Hope you don't mind. I mentioned your name there, offering the information that ChatGPT is not great for references or footnotes, and it plagiarizes. And I mean, let me put it this way. Oh wait, I don't know. I'm not the first one supposed to talk about this scenario. It's for Elaine, but I'll just say thanks for mentioning that about the shortcomings, and we'll get to that, I think. So I'll stop sharing and hand it over to our librarian, who got a big shout out in the chat earlier, just talking about how great their services are. So awesome.
Thanks, Kristen. Yeah, for me, there's a number of things that Braden could have done to help himself. First, he appears to be in this situation because of time management issues, which we brought up in the last scenario as well. It's so important to give yourself enough time to work through the requirements of an assignment. And one way to do that is to work backwards from the deadline and think about how long you need for each stage of the assignment. Braden should have also clarified the assignment instructions with his instructor. That would have been the right move from the outset. The other thing that it appears from this scenario is that Braden has not used the library to find sources for the assignment. And that's another important way to avoid the situation that he finds himself in. Library staff can assist in determining which sources could be helpful to search for appropriate materials. And there are also citation guides and resources that we've created that would have been helpful to Braden so that he could cite his sources correctly and avoid the fake citation issue. So I'm going to just put a couple of links to our citation guide and a guide for using Zotero and Mendeley in the chat as well, because there are citation management tools that you can use as well that can be helpful in creating those citations appropriately. So, and I will pass it over to Sarah Jean.
Thanks, Elaine. Yeah, you're definitely right about the importance of planning here. And one strategy that I'll mention about planning when it comes to length is to look at your marking guide or rubric and look at the percent assigned to each component or sometimes section. And so, for example, if the introduction is worth 10%, but the analysis section is worth 35%, it's already telling you more of the really core part of your assignment is in the analysis. And that's where, you know, roughly 35% of the words should go. So you can kind of think of it in that way. And even at the outlining stage, try to assign a number or percent of about how many words you're going to do for that section, so you can keep an eye on it as you're drafting. One of the things that Braden was struggling with was writing and editing for conciseness. So I'll give you a little lesson on that now for some strategies you can use yourself before you get to that point of feeling you need to get ChatGPT to do it for you. So while you're actually writing or drafting, maybe this seems a little obvious, but get right to the point. Try not to dance around that idea that you want to convey. And one way you can do that is to be direct. Use the active voice, because passive voice, which would show like an action being done to the subject of the sentence, it's wordy. It adds more words into the sentence. So an example would be, this paper was written by me. That's passive, and it's 6 words. Whereas if you write that actively and you say, I, the subject, wrote this paper, did that action, it's only 4 words. It's very much more direct. And to further avoid wordiness, you can also focus on one idea at a time while you're writing. When you combine multiple ideas into one sentence, it can create a really long sentence that's hard to follow. So again, be direct and try to give that one concise idea per sentence. And then when you get to the point that Braden was at, where he went to use ChatGPT, it's at the editing stage of writing. So again, with planning, you would have set aside time for this, and you can edit specifically for conciseness when you realize that you're over the word count. So an easy way that you can do this is go by levels. First, look at the whole paper and determine, do you have any excess or repetitive or off-topic paragraphs? If you can slash out an entire paragraph, great. You might have met your word count already. Then you can look at the paragraph level and see, is each sentence playing an important role, or are some of them repetitive, or some of them off topic, and you can remove entire sentences. You can also combine 2 sentences on a similar idea into a shorter single sentence. Then you can go to the sentence level, replace long strings of words with a single word that means the same thing. So an example is, we have in English phrasal verbs, like we might say break down, and the verb is 2 words long, but there's a single word that can replace it, separate. Come up with basically just means conceive, like an idea. Has to do with, that's 4 words. You can simply say involves. And then you can even look at the word level and strike out excess words like describing words, adjectives. And Stephen King particularly advises getting rid of adverbs. So just to let you know what that would be, extensive would be an adjective, a describing word. Extensively would be the adverb. It describes an action. So I don't know, check out Stephen King's work. If you see an ly in there, you can think, he wasn't following his own rule there. So that was just a little lesson on writing and editing for conciseness. Another thing I want to mention is Braden is really smart to want his message to be clear. And he can also aim for this himself by avoiding academic sounding vocabulary. Instead asking as he writes, is what I'm saying clear? And during revisions, which he would also have time set aside for through his planning, he can try to read the paper from someone else's point of view put himself in someone else's shoes to make sure that everything makes sense. He can read the paper out loud, use a text-to-speech tool like Words Read Aloud or the Read and Write app that AU students have access to, and I'll give you the links for. That would help to check for flow and clarity. And beware that ChatGPT might actually go for high vocabulary that could actually obscure your meaning. If you do use ChatGPT and acknowledge that as the instructor has allowed, then be sure to look over its work. It can't do the final step. You need to participate to make it yours and make sure it did what you actually wanted it to do, like not put in made-up citations. And the same is true for other grammar tools like Grammarly or even the editor in Word. Don't just automatically let it make an edit without rereading the sentence to make sure it still makes sense, because you could accidentally introduce an error into your work, or worse, as in Braden's case, with the made-up citations. So I'll post some links to resources for concise writing. I think Kristen might have already done that, as well as the link to check out more about the text-to-speech tools.
Thanks, Sarah Jean. I made a video on writing concisely once, and in it I was editing my own undergraduate papers, you know, a clear 15 years later. And I think one of them, the sentence had something like 40 words with, you know, 10 different punctuation points in it. And I was able to get it down to a third of that size with 1 comma and 1 period. So it really is possible. You just have to give yourself that time to, you know, and what Sarah Jean was saying about active voice can't be overstressed. I think it's really helpful. I write the first time getting my ideas out, and then I revise for the person trying to read it. So what helps them comprehend my ideas? Joe kicked the ball, or the ball was kicked by Joe? What's easier on your ears, right? So just for this ChatGPT example, we've heard a lot about planning your writing and researching properly, but let's also just think about how and why and when we're using AI for learning, and when that is something that our instructor has said, you know, because in Braden's case, it was allowed to be used in a certain stage of the writing process. And I have to think to myself, okay, my instructor wanted me to use it for a certain part of the writing process, but not this other part of the writing process. And I hope and I assume that there's a reason behind that, and that the reason behind that has something to do with my educative betterment and meeting the goals of the course. So I would ask myself a series of questions, just problem solving this as a student. Is this last bit that I'm asking ChatGPT to do something that I need to learn to do? And so am I shortcutting my own learning by doing this? That's a question, right? Because obviously the student has, because there was an explicit statement about what they could use it for, and they violated that, this would be an academic integrity issue. And so it would have to be included on the transparency statement. And so this is something that I just want to say, I don't envy students right now having to navigate this part of your educative journey. I'm sure you didn't think I would be taking these courses with the advent of this AI tool. And so what you're going to, I think, have to take under consideration now is, what do I need to learn to do? And what do I need to learn to do with generative AI? And where are the courses where I learn this? And where are the courses where I learn to use this tool properly? And so that has to be a conversation with your instructor. That has to be, in a way, a conversation with yourself and your goals and what you want to end up taking with you to your workplace and how to use appropriately. And just not sort of shortcutting if you don't need to. But then, of course, you know, just really advocating that you're really transparent and upfront with your instructor about what you're using. And we don't expect these lines to be perfect right now. That's why we have to keep going back to those conversations. Because it is really a gray zone when we're thinking about Grammarly Pro, ChatGPT, whatever you're using it for, right? And so either way, whatever tool we're using, we need to learn how to do our own research, right? That's one of the core skills that this scenario tells us. We can't have citations that don't do anything. When we're using research, we're using real research, right? So that has to be something we know how to do. And then I'll hand it over to Sarah Jean for our last scenario. I'm sure we'll have a lot to talk about.
Thanks, Kristen. Yeah, one more point I just wanted to make on the previous scenario is, and sorry, it might have come up, and I was looking for something, but if you're not sure how you can use ChatGPT or other generative AI in your course, then check with your instructor or the course coordinator, because they will have developed some kind of expectation around, is it appropriate and how is it appropriate to use it for that course or a certain assignment. Okay, so our last scenario is called the perfect paragraph. Faria is taking a qualitative research methods course and must explain her methodology in detail in a section of her paper. She happens to be using the same methods for this paper as from a previous course, in which she similarly had to explain the methodology in her paper. She's proud of how successful her methods were last time and feels her explanation from the previous course is clear and concise. So she reuses just the one paragraph in her current paper. It contains citations to the sources she uses, and it is her own original writing. Is this an academic integrity issue? If so, why?
Okay, so I will have a little bit of a different question this time. So, and if we have extra time, we'll definitely keep talking about ChatGPT. I can see it's still going on in the comments there. So Faria has taken this perfect paragraph, put it into another paper. And I guess the question I have for you is just your thoughts about whether you think this is more of a writing issue or an academic integrity issue or both. And so the Menti code here is 9444026. And you just sort of can plot it on here. So does Faria mostly need some help with writing, or is this mostly an issue of violating integrity? Oh my goodness, this is so cool. We've got answers all over the spectrum, it looks like. That's an interesting way to take people's responses. There's polarizing. People have really taken different approaches. Okay. So first we are going to hear from Sarah Jean. I'll stop sharing.
Very interesting plotting there. So there is an academic integrity issue here called self-plagiarism. And this happens when you borrow from your own previous work without acknowledging that you've done so. And the reason for that is it makes it seem, and Kristen will talk more about the reason behind it, but it makes it seem like this second instance of using it is new and novel, a new and novel instance of the same idea, the same wording, like you're trying to pass off your work as unique to this course and this assignment. Now, there are some courses where this is normally allowed. Those would be courses where assignments are connected. So for example, maybe you have a proposal, then an annotated bibliography, and then a longer paper, and maybe even that paper I've noticed in some health disciplines courses, for example, especially at the graduate level, the longer paper might be split into 2 drafts that are separate assignments, or multiple sections are done at separate times. So in these cases, it might be common for you to occasionally use similar wording, like between your proposal and your final paper. And maybe the abstract, the introduction, might use some of the same wording as your proposal. Not necessarily, because the project does shift and change over time, but you might get some overlap. Especially if a longer paper is split into 2 drafts, of course you'll use the same wording in the second draft for parts that don't need to be revised. In this situation, though, it doesn't hurt to check with your instructor just to make sure you understand their expectations. It doesn't sound like this is the case for Faria. She might be able to cite herself to avoid self-plagiarism, but I would still recommend to check with her instructor, who can clarify whether they would prefer her to cite herself. Maybe they'll allow her to recycle the paragraph, or write a new methods section. And I was thinking too, if the research for both projects is actually connected in some way, like if she's building on previous research, she might also be able to simply acknowledge that the same methods were used in the previous related research. Now, for those of you who voted this as a writing issue, I do agree in that it still should be possible to write a new methods section, because the information will be placed in this new context. I think that Faria's writerly voice will have changed slightly since her previous course, and even her understanding of the methods and how to explain them will be slightly different. This is a different project, and I think she'll surprise herself by how a different wording comes out, even if she doesn't have that original paragraph in front of her. And this is similar to one of the main rules of effective paraphrasing. Explain the original as you understand it now, in the words that arise now, without having it in front of you. And then usually that will prevent you from bringing over the exact wording. So we can hear from Elaine to see what her suggestions are.
Yeah, thanks very much, Sarah Jean. And I agree with that rephrasing yourself, because it is a different, you're in a different place than you were when you wrote that paper. And so the way you think about it now is going to be different than the way you thought about it then. The other thing that Faria could do is actually to do some additional research on that particular method using the library's collection. Because depending on how long ago the previous assignment was written, there might be new literature that's available on the research method that would help to clarify her understanding of the method. Unfortunately, the assumption that Faria seems to make is that she already knows everything about the method. And, you know, we are lifelong learners. We never know everything about everything. So there's always opportunity to do a bit more research to see what else is out there on a particular topic. A careful analysis of the assignment instructions might have also revealed that something else was needed, which would be helpful. Generally speaking, having recent literature on your works cited or reference list is a good thing. And library staff, as I've said before, library staff are available and can assist in helping to create search strategies that will help to find current literature and appropriate sources to search. Crystal.
Yeah, thanks, Elaine. Actually, I found both of your responses kind of showed me more about the scenario than I was thinking. You know, this idea of Faria saying, well, I took this course, I made this amazing methodologies paragraph, and I'm going to use the same methodology, so I'm going to just paste this. There's so much going on there around being in a new course and just using the same thing again. Even if you rewrote it, is that really the best way to approach your learning? You know, we're really here to experiment and try new things. And there must be something in that course that has something different to offer that she could be using in relationship with the instructor, with the library. And so you kind of want to squeeze out of it what you can, because once you go into the world, whether that's to workplace or graduate program or whatever it is, you want to really gather up all those different experiences you can. And so it kind of struck me that she was maybe shortchanging herself. And also that, you know, there's this Dunning-Kruger effect around people who know a lot think that they don't know because they know how much they don't know. But people who often don't know a lot think that they do know a lot because they don't know a lot. That's the Dunning-Kruger effect. You can look it up. It's fun to think about. But I wonder if Faria isn't doing that a little bit, saying, well, this is the best I can come up with for methods because they are the best, right? It's, well, there's so much out there we don't yet know. And so that's why I like the research answer and, you know, thinking about writing in where you're learning now and using that educational journey to track your changes over time. What have you learned? How have you grown? If she used these methodologies in a previous course, were there results that were interesting such that you want to revise that methodology? Are we really using the scientific method here in all of its glory? So that's a question that I had, actually, just even looking at the scenario. But I can answer this as an instructor, you know, really, truly, if the student had just emailed me, I would have considered at least partially being able to use this. And you know, say that there's part of it that she wants to use, or the sources that are the same, but maybe wants to rewrite it, could enter into a discussion with your instructor about it. That's the issue. And that's why self-plagiarism is an issue. And, you know, part of what we're training you to do here too is to think about you as a developing scholar. And when you actually enter the world of scholarly publishing, if you do that, self-plagiarism is a really big no-no. And it's a really big no-no. You have to always be acknowledging where you published something and making sure that it's original and it hasn't been published before. So, you know, we're also trying to incorporate those academic norms to you through your work. I put it in the chat because somebody asked for it, but this does qualify under cheating. And so really, it's never worth the risk to try to fly under the radar and put in some of your previous work. And so really just enter into that discussion with your instructor. I see that the chat is blowing up. There's lots of discussion. Should we just take some of these questions? If we're all done with the perfect paragraph situation?
Yeah, I think I can answer Kevin's question.
Please.
That where you have multiple courses related to the same research in graduate work, this I think would be quite similar to where I mentioned like that a course might have a bunch of assignments that are connected. One builds on the previous. You know, you can check with your supervisor, but I'm guessing in this case, it will probably be kind of like what Kristen was saying. They're going to allow it. It's building on itself. So, but really, it's a good conversation to have with your supervisor just to make sure everything is above board. But I'm thinking it should be in that case. And then a couple students are asking about what it would mean, a substantial portion, what a substantial portion would mean.
Yeah, I think that when policy is written, it's not written with numbers for a reason. 10%, 12%, 200 words, 100 words. I think this is the situation where you want to say probably, you want to think about what a good rule of thumb is going to be. And a good rule of thumb is going to be to avoid. And so I would take a zero approach to this unless you have a discussion with your instructor. I have had students before, upper level students that are super keen, and they'll footnote and say, as I argued in my previous paper for my other class, and then they'll summarize themselves in a footnote. And, if you want to refer to your own work and develop that budding scholar identity, we really encourage that. But there are rules around originality and reuse. There's rules around that.
Yeah, and if I can just jump in there, I think in Lee's case, citing yourself for this paper that you wrote in 2013 would probably be the best approach. If you have a reason for discussing that paper now in a fresh paper, I think citing yourself is probably the best way to go.
Elaine, if you want to say something on that, I'm going to take this question here from Shern Khan after, but I want to give you a chance if you wanted to say something.
No, I don't have anything else to add.
Okay.
So.
This question here, what does it mean when you upload your coursework on websites unintentionally not knowing it was an offense and someone copied your work and the notation stays on the transcript for 2 years? Does it change anything? So a couple things in response to that question. Thank you for that question. Part of why we're doing these education sessions is because we don't want things like that to happen to students. And we're trying to say that it's really not worth it to use those websites and to show you the good university resources you have available to you so that you can avoid them. When it comes to your question here, fortunately, unfortunately, at Athabasca and most institutions that you will find yourself in, you have a duty, a proactive responsibility to know the policies that affect you. So that means that the misconduct policy, all of the policies that you're subject to as a student, the responsibility is on you to know them. Now, does that mean you just download them into your brain and you act perfectly all the time? That's not really how it works. But when you say something like unintentionally, uploaded to one of these websites, I could understand. What we want is for you to know the policies that you're subject to avoid this in the first place, because it's really hard to take the I didn't know into one of these formal procedures. The I didn't know is not going to get you very far, because the idea is that we're entering an agreement where we all have responsibilities, where we all have to know the policies that we're subject to. So I really, really encourage people to know their policies. Don't get paranoid about them when you read them, saying I'm doing something wrong all the time, but know them so that you know when to talk to your instructor when you're getting into a gray zone. That's how I'll put it.
But if we go back to Kaleigh, Kaleigh was the one who uploaded to coursehero. She got kind of sucked into it. If a student were to learn that I wasn't supposed to do that, and they genuinely didn't know, one of the options I think people were voting for there is that Kaleigh could talk to her instructor about it, say that she's trying to rectify it. What steps can a student actually take in that case?
Do you mean like with coursehero or with an instructor?
With coursehero as an example, or both, like they find themselves in that ethical dilemma. They've already done the action.
Mhm.
What could they do?
I think it goes a really long way to be upfront with everyone to say, I made a mistake. I'm trying to rectify this. And, I didn't know, but I'm going to do something about it. Someone has said, shoot, shovel, and shut up. I haven't heard that before, but I like alliteration too. I would just suggest doing what you can to rectify it and having the conversation. And, try to avoid these websites. And when in doubt, don't. Thanks, Sophie. That's a great rule of thumb. Yeah, because you can get in trouble for aiding another in committing misconduct by having your stuff online. So it's really important not to put your stuff up.
The other thing too that we should be doing, we should all be doing as we're looking at websites, before we click on them, have a look at what the URL is. And then if it looks like it's, the scenario that Kaleigh was in, where everything is blurry, that looks a little sketchy to me. She could have also, which we didn't talk about, but she could have also gone and done a search for coursehero to see what it is. If it had been some other site, she could have done that. And yeah, that idea of when in doubt, don't. It's a really good way to think about it. But always be aware of what links you're actually clicking on, because you can inadvertently get yourself into trouble. And if a site is asking you to upload something in order to see something, then that's also a big red flag. Just stay away from those. They're more trouble than it's worth. Okay.
Janice's question was a really good one about if you suspect a group member on a group project is using ChatGPT, how to deal with that. That's a tough scenario.
And I'll just, Lee has put in, I love our students. I'm so old school. I would never approach these sites. Thanks, Darren. Lee is asking if it appears a student made every effort to avoid plagiarism, but the instructor had a bad week and gave them 0. Can the student argue this, and will the institution be empathetic? Well, hopefully our policy is our policy, and it's there in place to correct for people having a bad week. And you have channels of advocacy and appeal should there be issues. So you can go to AUSU, you can file an appeal. It really depends on what you mean about making every effort to avoid plagiarism. Is that about citations, or is that about, it really depends, but you should, you have a process available to you, which is to appeal to a coordinator, maybe a chair, and look into the student appeals process and get some advocacy through AUSU, and make sure that, citations, direct quotes, and paraphrasing. Yeah. So in addition to taking that formal route to try to deal with the plagiarism accusation, also going to the right site, going to the library where there's citation guides, getting some help on how to. I'm not a perfect citer. I'm not a perfect paraphraser. I sometimes think, well, is it every other sentence if I'm still talking about the same author? You know, nothing is perfect. And so also it's just not about tacking on at the end. It's about how you use a source. So that's a skill that you have to develop over time. And so that's a conversation with an instructor and maybe an appeal, depending um, on where you're getting some resources. But we're at time. Amazing. Oh, is this? Yeah. That we'll keep answering a couple of these questions in the chat, but we do have to sign off at the hour-long webinar. But thank you everyone for your participation. I'll maybe hand it off to Sarah Jean if you want to close off.
Sure. I just popped in the chat links to appeals and the Ombuds office, which will be 2 resources you can follow up on. Thanks everybody for your awesome participation. Great chat. It's so invigorating for us and, you know, getting us to think about things a little bit differently. Maybe some ideas for some future scenarios. So thank you for taking the time to be here and participating. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks.
Thanks. Bye.